What's going on, everyone? Hunter with Rebel Outdoors. And if you haven't seen my recent video where I go over my arrow build for 2025, I was kind of doing a little bit of thinking, and I want to do some tinkering and see if this arrow will compete with what will potentially be my new arrow for 2026. Still going to be an Easton 5.0 300 spine arrow with the DCA Super Saber Minis, but we're going to play with some of the components, and I want to see how different they will fly, weights, things like that. So let's get into it. So on the table here I have all the different components that I'm going to be using. Now I'm not going to be changing the arrow for this year. If the results are dramatic and I definitely like the newer style, I will wait until after my elk hunt to change things. However, I still have a dozen of these made up, so we're going to continue to shoot even though 3D season, as far as like bigger 3D events, is over. Obviously still do a lot of shooting here at the house, so plenty of room to lose some arrows, especially at some of the ranges we like to shoot. But I'm going to be building these other arrows. We're going to be checking weights, lengths, things like that. We'll do some shooting later on, so it should be good. So here we got our little scale on, and I'm going to put the current arrow setup on here, and you can see that is 410 grains. So we have the DCA Super Saber Minis. We have 3 of them. Easton 5.0 in a 300 spine. We have the 50 grain stainless steel half out, 100 grain tip. So basically, in order to make this work, what we're going to be doing is cutting, instead of a 28-inch arrow, we're going to be cutting these at 28.5 because we are going to be doing a hit insert with a collar. 16 grains there. 18.6, and you round up and call it 19. And then we do have some 125 grain kill points. So one thing I'm going to be looking for while I'm doing this is, because I'm going to be adding a 1/2 inch to the arrow and a little bit different weights with components, nothing too crazy, but and then on top of that, when we do the helical on my current arrow, I have a max left helical, so it's about a 6 degree. I picked up this new Boeing Cauldron clutching jig at TAC, Snow River TAC, and it comes with a bunch of different of these little inserts here that you can change out to do different helicals, not have a helical, things like that, so it's pretty cool. Now with these Super Saber vanes, I recommend a 2.5 helical, and because we don't have that, these are 3 helical in the left, so we're going to test these out. So we will have a couple of different things that could affect the arrow. I want to see if it'll change my sight tape, how much it'll change my sight tape. Is it a better tape? Is it a worse tape? Does these group better? Do they not group better? Those kind of things. So we're going to do some experimenting. And with these vanes, I also recommend you use a primer pen, so I have the one that they include there. Let's go ahead and give these guys just one little swipe down. Give that a second to dry here. Now with this jig, you can actually orientate which way your knot goes, so you can twist that little knob in there, and I have my red as my cock vane, so go ahead. Go ahead and let that sit for a minute. Now you want the red part to be in line with the arm, and you can see that it's putting good pressure right in about the center of the vane. And there we are, there's a 3-degree left helical. Now that we got our 3-degree left helical, the hit insert is installed. What we're going to do next, throw on the collar, screw in the 125 grain field point. See how much this weighs. Looks like we got 427. It keeps going back and forth there. So we did get a little bit heavier arrow, and I even weighed it with a 100 grain insert. That would bring the arrow weight to 402 instead of 427. So one thing I would like to do is kind of go on Podium Archery's website and see what the FOC of this arrow versus my current one is. Then we'll go do some shooting. Alright, so here just doing some math. We have what I'm currently shooting, and we have 410 grain for weight and then 16.09 FOC, and then doing the hit collar with the 125 tip, 427 for arrow weight and 17.03 FOC. So now what I would like to do is do some groupings. I think we're going to shoot 40, 60, and 80 only because I'm pretty certain with these it's going to bump me down a sight tape. So I'm going to try to keep it relatively close. I was originally thinking doing 60, 80, 100, but again, I'm sure the difference will be more than what I want to do in break arrows, which I'm not trying to do. So we're going to shoot a group of 3 with my current arrows, and then I'm going to shoot these at the different ranges and see how things go. Alright, so fast forward a few days. I've been doing some testing with the different setups. So we have my usual grain arrow weight. We have these newer ones that I built. I've been trying them with the 125 field point, and then I've also been trying them with the 100 grain field point just to kind of see what some of the differences are. So I was shooting these at 60 and 80, and the differences were quite interesting. So I'm going to show you guys kind of what I got going on here as far as some of the data that I've written down. But we're going to go take a look at some of the groupings at 60 yards for the 3 different arrows. So taking a look at these, you've got the all red one as my normal arrows. This is the hit and collar with the 125, and then this is the hit and collar with the 100 grain. This one I'm pretty sure I dropped my arm on it, so I'm going to go reshoot this one real quick. Alright, that was kind of more of what I was expecting. It was a little high. The pin was a little high on release, but I mean, if I was shooting a little low there, that makes about sense. Gap wise, I would assume that one should probably be more around here, but I mean, not a huge difference in these arrows. Alright, so I know it's not the best example, but hopefully that'll kind of give you guys an idea of what we're looking at. Now when I was doing my initial groupings, because I also wanted to find which sight tape each arrow configuration would have, obviously with it being a faster, lighter arrow, the hit insert with the collar and the 100 grain tip was shooting higher than what my normal arrows are. So I'm going to show you guys a picture of this just in case you want to kind of pause the video and read some of the specs. But real quickly, I'll go over everything. So the arrow that I have been shooting, and which I will be taking on my elk hunt, I just did a whole video on this setup, so if you already seen that, I'll go through it real quickly. All these are Easton 5.0s and a 300 spine. They're all using the DCA Mini Sabers. Really been liking these fletchings, pretty sweet. They have their little Easton 5mm microlight knock. Carbon to carbon on this is 28. Now we have a steel 50 grain half out and a 100 grain field point. So like all the broadheads that I bought for this year, with the intention of using this arrow, and especially on the elk hunt, are all 100 grains. Now I've kind of been thinking about trying out the hit insert. I wouldn't mind changing up a setup for whitetail. I'm definitely not going to change anything for elk because that is like 2 weeks away. But trying to figure out what would be the best configuration. Now again, both of these Easton 5.0s, these are actually cut to 28.5 because it's a hit with a collar. DCA Super Saber Minis, and these are at a 3-degree left. The other ones are a max left helical. I think I forgot to mention that. But as far as the front end, we both have the hit insert with the number 2 collar from Easton, and we have a 100 grain field point and a 125 grain field point. So looking at it currently right now, I'm using a 410 grain arrow with 16.09 FOC, sight tape number 30. If I was going to use the hit collar with the hit insert with the collar and the 125 grain field point, I would have 127 grain arrow, sight tape number 39, and 1703 FOC. And last but not least, we have the hit insert with the collar, 100 grain field point, 402 total weight, and sight tape 34 with an FOC of 14.8. So that is cooking. If I was going to build a tack specific arrow, definitely want to do the hit with the 100 grain because sight tape 34 is cooking. Now of course there's always the argument like tighter pins are better because you can help get that arrow to the animal faster, or if you misrange something, you know, that your pin gap's not as big, so if you underestimate or overestimate, your margin of error is smaller than if I was running like a heavier setup, bigger pin gaps, and a slower sight tape. I would definitely like to swap it out to hit with a collar. The thing I cannot decide between is 100 grain or 125. We have 14.8 FOC. Shut up, chicken. And just over 17 FOC. 39 sight tape over a 34 sight tape. I'm kind of leaning more towards the 100 grain. I know it's a pretty light arrow, but other than that elk hunt I got going on, the only thing I'll be doing this fall is whitetail. And yes, normally those are not far shots. However, I can shoot far, so I like to shoot far. And several times last year I had deer duck my arrows because whether they were just too slow or what, I don't know. But I think if I somehow lose all my arrows and decide to change this year, I'm going to do the collar with the hit and the 125. If I decide to change it up after the elk hunt, but probably definitely more so for our next hunting season, I will be still running the Easton 5.0 with the 3-degree left helical, the hit with the collar, and a 100 grain field point because that is cooking, and obviously we do a lot of 3D shoots, so that I think will be a good combination. And even if I go out west hunting mule deer or something like that, or pronghorn or whatever, those are going to be some far shots, so I think something like this will be really good. All right, we're not going to talk about broadheads, but long story short, what I'll be using for elk is the Sever Titanium 1.5, and then I have some 2 inches for whitetail that I'm going to be using. But if I was going to go out on like a Nebraska mule deer hunt or something this year in antelope, I would still be using the 1.5s because those will have higher penetration and better aerodynamics than the 2-inch. So I would really like your guys' input, and then I will also be doing a little poll on my Instagram and TikTok and things like that. So if you're not following me on those other social platforms, be sure to do so. I would really appreciate that. Would you rather have this same setup with a 125 and a little bit higher FOC around that 17 range, or would you have a lighter setup with 100 grain and some cooking FOC just under 15? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. And just so you guys kind of know like what we're working with as far as bow, we have a Mathews Lift X 33 axle, 29.5 inch draw, 80 pounds with 85% let off. So for any of you FOC, FPS guys or whatever, comments down below. Hopefully this video was informative, if not entertaining. And until then, we will catch you guys in the next one.